Good evening, and thank you everyone thank you for joining us to this Transition to Residency series webinar hosted by the AACOM's Council on Residency Placement and the AOGME Residents and Fellows Council. My name is Dr. Holly Waters. I'm an assistant professor and vice chair of Osteopathic Principles in Practice and the OPP Predoctoral Fellowship Director at Nova Southeastern University's Dr. Kiran C. Patel College of Osteopathic Medicine at the Tampa Bay Regional Campus. I will be the facilitator for this session. So thank you everyone again for joining us. And before we get started, I'm going to review a few housekeeping notes for everyone. This panel is going to be recorded and available to view on the AOGME and the CORP website within 7 days. You can feel free to submit questions using the chat feature at any time. And if you experience any technical issues, you please use the chat feature to notify us. You can also submit questions anonymously via the Q&A feature. And we can move on to the next slide for the introductions. Okay, so this is our webinar based on some transition to residency regarding using data for the match. So our panel is going to be sharing their experiences, perspectives, and advice using publicly available data published by the NRMP to help medical students put themselves in the way of successfully applying for residency. There's a lot of information out there, and it can be very overwhelming. So we have a number of experts here to help you make sense of it all and to know where to begin. So if we could have our opening panelists introduce themselves, we'll start off with Ms. Katie Harden.
Hello, everyone. My name is Katie Harden, and I am a residency placement coordinator with Kansas City University based on our Joplin campus.
Next, we have Ms. Kim Peck.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kim Peck. I am the Director of Academic and Career Advising at Michigan State University College of Osteopathic Medicine.
Ms. Kimberly Warfield. Ms. Warfield, could you try that again? You were still on mute.
It doesn't work, does that? So hello, let me try this again. I'm Kimberly Warfield. I'm the first and second year residency counselor at the Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine in Fort Worth, Texas.
Thank you so much. And we also have Mr. Nicholas Latour.
Good evening. I'm Nicholas Latour. I am the Assistant Director for Career and Match Advising at Rowan Virtual School of Osteopathic Medicine in South Jersey.
All right. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. And a special thank you to Katie Harden for providing a lot of the slide content for this presentation as well. Okay, so the overarching goals of this webinar are to be using the data that is published to help you choose a specialty that's a good fit for you and to help you choose the residency programs that are a good fit for you, using those to help you find audition rotation, tailor your applications to get a good fit. The importance of using that data in order to make sure that you are selecting programs and specialties that you are competitive for and that are a good fit, and then where that data is located and how to find it. Next slide, please. All right, so we'll get started off with our speaker presenting on the right fit specialty.
Hi, so that would be me. So hi, I'm Kimberly again. I hope everybody's having a good night and you're comfortable and at home getting to watch this or somewhere comfortable. So let's talk about right fit for specialty. So we have a lot of student questions that we'll get to, but some of them look like, you know, how to choose a specialty, any tips on choosing the specialty without having rotations in all of them, what kind of student would enjoy anesthesia, different things like that. So we're going to talk first about, of course, I know you've all heard this on your home campuses, but I really want to reiterate that right fit for specialty really starts with reflecting on what you want in your career and asking yourself, your interest, what subjects and rotations do you enjoy the most, your skills like strengths, diagnostics, procedures, patient communication. Are you truly empathetic? Do you, do you enjoy a hospital life or an office, clinic practice? Values, do you prefer work-life? What kind of work-life balance are you looking for? We all prefer a work-life balance, right? But what are you looking for? Research opportunities, high patient interaction, and then lifestyle, consider your preferred pace, on-call requirements, family plans, family planning, like you have kids now, what's that going to look like when you do have children if you don't? And then activities like, and this is super important, I think this is super important, I say this a lot, but take time to take a few minutes to jot down your top interests and values, and keep that with you. I'm a big advocate of journaling, and we also use AAMC Careers in Medicine assessments to learn more about ourselves and track our progress as our interests develop and solidify. They change from first year, from your clinical courses to each rotation will change you. Next slide, please. So we talk about specialty fit assessments. So there are several tools out there. We have our AAMC Careers in Medicine website and those assessments. I encourage my students to, especially when they get into rotations, to be doing those assessments after each rotation. If they do it after every 3 or 4, I'm lucky. But just to see how it changes, it holds all of your assessments. Myers-Briggs, let's find out what your personality is, where you fit, extrovert, introvert. Mine's changed over the course of my career. And then, of course, specialty specific interest surveys, and then speaking with your advisors and mentors, really find out what was their career path. How were their residency interviews? What do they think put them over the top? What do they think might have slowed them down? How did they decide what they loved about their specialty? Next slide, please. So when you're exploring your different specialties, so let's look at think about things like medical versus surgical. Are you more interested in patient management or procedures? Inpatient versus outpatient. Do you thrive in the hospital setting or in outpatient clinics? I've managed multiple residencies, and the last one was family medicine, which is more clinic oriented, but we had a big hospital service. I had several family medicine residents say, I want to be a hospitalist, and they are today. So we trying to figure out where do you thrive at, right? Acute versus chronic care. Are you drawn to the immediate interventions or long-term patient relationships? And then patient demographics. Do you want to work with children, adults, or specific populations, right? And when we think about children, we also have to think about parents, because you don't just get children, you also get the adult, right? And if you're thinking about geriatrics, also think about you get it the other way. So a lot of times with geriatrics, you get that wonderful geriatric patient, but you also get their kids who kind of want to micromanage sometimes. So I'm in that stage in my life, so it's very evident for me. So next slide, please. And then I really encourage my students. I'm always like, I don't want you to spend all this time in medical school and all this time in residency and not love what you do, right? We're going to have days that we don't love it. We're going to have days that's like, oh, I have to get up and go. But the days that I have that feeling and I get up and go to my job and I do love what I do, it makes it easier when I get there, right? Because all the other stuff is gone. So certain specialties tend to attract certain personality types. If you're analytical and problem solving, and I hear my students say this to me a lot, they get intrigued by internal medicine and radiology and pathology. Hands-on and procedure focused, surgery, emergency medicine, anesthesiology, okay? Empathetic and patient-centered, family medicine, peds, and psych. So, and these are all generalizations. You may be some of these things and think, I don't want to do psychiatry, but they're generalizations and just things to think about as we are looking at our fit for specialty. Next slide, please. So when you're choosing the right fit specialties, so we really want to evaluate our competitiveness, like it's a reality check. So when you meet with your residency counselors, and all the residency counselors I know are pretty straightforward, pretty plain spoken. Evaluate your licensing exam scores, the NRMP data and reporting tools, as we're going to talk about in just a moment, will give you a very clear picture. Failures and remediations, they impact your competitiveness. Doesn't mean you're not going to get where you're going, but you have another obstacle to overcome. Okay. Experiences. Think about all your experiences, like from the time you decided, hey, I want to go into medicine, and evaluate those and think about those and what brought you joy. What did you leave feeling like, I had a really good day. This was a really good day, you know? And then match success rates, like dually applying may be necessary. And when your counselors recommend that, I suggest that you listen to those suggestions. They're advising on data. So next slide, please. So Miss Katie, I think it's you.
Yeah, so before you dive into the NRMP data, I really encourage you to get on the AAMC Careers in Medicine website and complete those assessments, because those assessments, the options are, there's one that can assess your personality type. There's another assessment that can help you find, based on how you answer questions, which specialties most align with your preferences and what you're looking for in a work style and everything, as well as the Careers in Medicine website has a breakdown of descriptions of each specialty, what those roles look like, the career path to get to them, or the education path to get to them, and what the work-life balance is, what your day-to-day looks like, scheduling and such. So those are really good things to explore. Once you start to figure out what specialties you're leaning towards, you need to start assessing, like Kimberly had talked about, your competitiveness. And unfortunately, academics are a major factor in how you perform both on academically in medical school, as well as your licensing exams impact your ability to match successfully in some specialties. So I am going to share my screen in just a moment, and we're going to do a complete dive into the NRMP Charting Outcomes. So the NRMP does release every 2 years the charting outcomes data. And so I'm going to share this with you, and we're only going to go over 2 specialties really quick. We want to help you understand what this data looks like, what it means, how to interpret this data and use this data to help you find right fit specialties based on how you have done academically or with your licensing exams especially. So I'm going to show you first family medicine. You'll find that family medicine, internal medicine, pediatrics, and emergency medicine have very similar data. You'll see the surgical specialties are much different. And so I'm going to show you a primary care, and I'm going to show you a surgical specialty so that you can just kind of see the difference. So each specialty, the data is laid out the same, all the same pages. It's just specialty specific. And what's great about this data is this is specific to DO seniors. So you can go to the NRMP website, and they've got a data tab, and you'll be able to go to this page. They also have a program director survey there that you can look at. There is also there's an interactive charting outcomes as well, where you can plug in some demographic info as well. Preferably though, with my students, we like to use this. So this first page has, you're going to see the column with the matched versus unmatched, the ratios, and what the common mean numbers were for everything. Honestly, I would focus mostly on what are the mean scores for level 2 and step 2. I don't know that I would rely heavily on number 7 through 10, the research, abstracts, publications, work, and volunteer experience numbers. You'll find some discrepancies in that, and I'll show you a little bit later why you're probably seeing some interesting, not really good patterns to rely on. But there's a couple of other charts that you'll be able to see in here. This is one I want to highlight. So this tells you number of contiguous ranks. What does that mean? A lot of students ask. How many interviews do you need to have and rank? So you'll only rank programs you interview with when you complete your rank order list during 4th year. How many programs must I rank in order to have a good chance of matching into this specialty? So for family medicine, to have an 80% chance of matching, an individual only needs to have 3 interviews. To have a 90% chance of matching, they need about 5 interviews. So you'll notice surgery in just a minute looks very different than this. So the next page of this is going to show you COMLEX data. I'll be honest, level 1 and step 1, I would not rely on these charts, because with COM24, this is the first class that had pass-fail scoring for their COMLEX level 1 and USMLE step 1. And when NRMP did this data, they still were doing numerical and not pass-fail reporting. And so the score unknown, those are individuals that had pass-fail. So focus more on level 2 and step 2 data. And you'll notice for family medicine, so navy blue means they matched successfully, green means they did not match. You notice pretty much everybody successfully matched. There's just a handful here and there that did not match. So here it gives you a graph or chart you'll be able to see with even a passing score. You have over a 90% chance of matching family medicine, which is great. Means it's very easy to match into this specialty. And so you can see this is COMLEX level 2 scores, 90% chance of matching, it's less than 400. So here's step 2 scores. One of the things to point out, when you see score unknown for step 2, those individuals didn't report scores. They didn't take USMLE step 2. And so you can see for family medicine, this is a very COMLEX friendly specialty where students are successfully matching. Most students are successfully matching family medicine, DO seniors, without taking step 2. And you can see all that here. So these next few slides, this is where I said it's the one thing you can rely on these next two slides with the charts is to be able to verify, can I successfully match without having research and without having publications? You can't really rely on the number because there's not a trend that helps you say, well, I got to have this number to match successfully into this specialty. And you'll find that with most of the specialties for research and publications. And same thing with the work experience and volunteering. It's great to see, but it's not data that you're going to use a whole lot to help you. So I'm going to move on to general surgery really quick. So again, you can see the same information, but I want to showcase the difference in chance of matching based on interview numbers. So 80% chance of matching, you got to have 10 interviews, and 90% chance of matching, it's 13. You look at COMLEX scores, it's quite a bit different. You want to be a competitive applicant for general surgery, you really need at least a 551 score or even over 600. So when you look at these ratios of those that matched versus this didn't match, you really want a great percent chance of matching, where this under 50% is not a great percent chance. So it helps you identify how competitive you are based on how you perform on your level 2 exam. And then we can also go to, here's the step 2. Notice here, that score unknown is very different because most general surgery programs, unfortunately, do require USMLE. We're seeing more and more not require it, but it's a work in progress. But you can see the score ratio to be a highly competitive applicant, you really need over a 241 to match successfully into general surgery. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can get back to our PowerPoint slides really quick. So the next slide you're seeing here is geographic preferences. So if you are going to be applying to a specialty that uses ARIS for applications, which is most specialties, ARIS utilizes what's called geographic preferences as a component of the application. And so you can, the way it works is select up to 3 regions. And you see on the screen, the map is broken up into 9 separate regions. And the way it works, you can pick up to 3 regions and then write a reason why you prefer that region. If you prefer that region, you then can write something for that region, and only programs in that region can see what you wrote. So programs outside of that region don't see it. There's a hyperlink on the screen that you'll be able to access once the PowerPoint slides are shared with you all. And I encourage you to check this out at it's on the ARIS website. They show you the data, the likelihood of being able to match when you geographic preference versus not preference for each specialty. And something you'll find is that most specialties are relying heavily on geographic preferences. So do you prefer their region? Do you have connections to their region? And you have a much higher chance of getting an interview. So we encourage you to look at that data, to look the specialties you're considering, and see how important is geographic preferences for that specialty. Because if you see it really impacts and increases your odds of getting an interview, you will probably want to go ahead and focus on using the geographic preferences and say, yes, I have 3 regions, and make sure you apply to programs only in those 3 regions. Or if you do apply outside of those regions, recognize your chance drops significantly. You can also say, I don't have a geographic preference, but again, the data is very different for that and your chance of getting an interview based on that. OB-GYN used residency CAS this year. They did not use geographic preferences. Emergency medicine has announced they are leaving ARIS next year. They did use geographic preferences this year, but they have not announced their application for next year. So we're not 100% sure if they will use, if they're going to incorporate geographic preferences into the application or not. So you can choose up to 3. You can choose 1, 2, or 3, or say, I don't have a preference, are the options for this. Next slide, please.
All right, I think this is back to me. So thank you so much. And so especially specific information and resources, there's several here. This is not the complete list, but it's many of the organizations that you will want to check out if you are interested in these specialties. On these pages, you will find out about letter of recommendation requirements, when different important dates open, virtual open houses and residency fairs. I also see this, and I've also seen this, especially when I did some deep dives into some plastic programs. In their Instagram's account, they're also showing these things on their social media. They're showing their virtual open houses and things like that on their social media. So I would actually go look out and see what they have. There are universal release dates for different applications. So I would be familiar with the website of the specialty that you are looking to go into. Okay, next slide, please. Also, AACOM has some amazing resources. You can look here. There are specialty specific advising resources here that are available to students. And then there's also an amazing residency application data guide that can help you guide you through most of the questions that you have. So next slide. I think it's the next section. Thank you so much.
Hi, so I'm going to be presenting selecting the right fit programs using data. So the first thing I wanted to start with is just a description of the different program position types. And I have them listed here. I'm just going to briefly go over them. Categorical is when positions begin in PGY1 and you have your full course of training in that one program. And that would be something like emergency med, family med. We also have a primary care position, and just like you imagine, it's primary care, internal med, or pediatrics positions. We also have advanced positions, and there are some specialties where you will begin in your PGY2 year in your specialty, and you will be required to do a preliminary year to begin. So if you go down to the preliminary year, it is a 1-year intern year, and it is a well-rounded year where you have a lot of variety of exposures and different specialties, and then you will move on to your advanced position. Some advanced programs or specialties are anesthesia, diagnostic radiology, and others. And then we have physician reserve. That's for anyone who's been in GME before, has maybe done another year, and that makes them qualified for these physician reserve positions. One thing to note is that there are some specialties that have a variety of categorical positions and advanced positions, and anesthesia would be an example of that. Next slide. So one of the things I always encourage my students is really to keep yourself organized. There is a lot of information to keep track of as you begin applying for auditions, figuring out what programs that you're interested in. So I just showed a basic tracking sheet that we share with our students, but create something that works for you and to make sure that you have all of the relevant information so you're not having to go back in repeatedly and look at things, that you have it all right in front of you, and you can sort and keep everything organized so you know exactly what you need to do. Next slide. Okay, so choosing right fit programs. There are a lot of considerations, and I like to separate them into personal application considerations and institutional considerations. Now, if you look at the personal application considerations, we have things such as, is it DO friendly? What does that mean? So is it DO friendly? Is it a program that will interview and match DO applicants? I think we all know there's some programs that you will not see a single DO in their program and some that do. And there's different variances of how many DOs you can find in programs. So I'm going to show you a little bit of how we find that out. We also have applicant criteria. Does the program have a minimum exam score? Are they looking for a minimum of 550 on their complex level 2? That's something that you should know before you're applying for auditions and actually applying to the program. You don't want to waste any time auditioning or applying to a program that you don't meet the minimum criteria. And another one is, do they require a passing score on the first attempt? Again, that's something that some programs will filter you out if you don't. And again, I will show you in a minute how we can find that out for these programs. Your geographic preferences, that's of course a big one for a lot of people, how they decide what programs they're going to select to apply to. International students, very important. Do they sponsor the visas that you need? And of course, mission, values, and culture. You want to find a program that is aligned with your values, what you want out of a residency program, and where you're going to thrive as a learner. And last but not least, patient population and practice. You may be really passionate about working with an underserved population, so that is definitely something that you want to look for as you are seeking out these programs. If we go on the right side, institutional considerations, there is a lot of different variety of programs and what they offer. We have locations of clinical training. Sometimes they're not in one area and you'll have to travel to different locations. What their curriculum looks like, the volume and types of procedures that that particular program experiences. What is the resident life and wellness like? Do they have certain initiatives and programs in place that fit what you're looking for in a residency program? And fellowships at the same program, at the same location. A lot of my students, like particularly internal med, there's a lot of students who their ultimate goal is to go into fellowships. And it is nice to seek out programs that have fellowships at the same program. And if they see that their graduates are often placed in those fellowships. And special tracks, maybe you're really interested in rural med, global health. Those are all things that you can look for and narrow down in your program search so you find programs that have some focus on your areas of interest. And then areas of concentration, maybe you're interested in sports med or OB. Again, those are all areas that you can find programs that align with your interests. Next slide. Okay. So there are a lot of sites and that you can find a lot of information to help you in your search. Kind of separated it out a little bit. We have a residency search databases. I'm going to go over Residency Explorer tool. I think that's a nice starter for students, and you can get a lot of information as you begin your residency program search. But like it was mentioned before, you're going to have this, and these will all be hyperlinked. These are all really great resources for finding information about programs. AACOM also has a lot of really great postdoc guide and affiliated program lists. I can't say enough, program websites. I have my students go look at all these different websites, but then at the end, always go back to the program website to look at their mission, their value, and for the most updated information out there. So program websites are really important to check those out. And also specialty fit, right fit resources. There are a lot of resources, specialty specific, like for emergency med, the MRMP, OB-GYN, the alignment check index. There's a lot of those out there to help make sure that you're on the right track. Next slide. So I know your head might be spinning with all these links and everything, but AACOM has come up with this guide. It's called the AACOM Residency Application Guide, and the hyperlink is right there. This guide will outline what each source of information is and how it can help you get the information you need to make the decisions that you need to make for your residency program. Next slide. Okay. So now I am going to begin sharing, and I'm going to go over a little demonstration of Residency Explorer. So if you haven't been on here, this is a website that is available to everyone. It's free. You just sign up with, create your username and password. And there's 3 different components. There's a profile, explore programs, and compare programs. I'm just going to go over the my profile first. And for this example, I chose internal medicine as my specialty. And on your profile, you can enter all of the things that are important to you. So if you don't have anything in here, if you don't have any thoughts about this yet, when you're first going in, that's fine.
Hey, Kim,
But
we can't see Residency Explorer.
okay, I think I moved it over, so I was looking on the right screen.
There you go.
Okay, sorry. I didn't want to be looking away, but I'll do that. Thank you, Katie. So you have a lot of different things. You have educational research opportunities. You can, if you're interested in being a hospitalist, you can click this. If you're particularly interested in women's health, there's a lot of things like international experience, global health, and the program offerings. So you may not even be aware that some of the programs offer these things. So this is a really great way to not only pick your preferences, but realize the different preferences that are out there. A lot of employment benefits, you may have a salary that you're looking for, or there's some things that maybe subsidized childcare is going to be really important to you because you have smaller children. We have practice environment. I have a lot of students who don't know if they want a community hospital, an academic medical center. So I say, let's check them all. And when you're auditioning, try some of both of them and experience it and see where your best fit is. Residency demographics and background. We have race, ethnicity, gender. So if you really want you want to work with a diverse group of residents, this may be something that you would include certain percentages, like minimum percentages you'd like to see. For osteopathic students, I always think it's helpful to put, for USDO graduates, I put a number in here, and every student's a little bit different, a minimum percentage of DOs that are accepted into the program or in the program. So that's something that I would collect. You don't have to do the 20%, but you can do something that works for you. And in this particular case, say I'm an internal medicine applicant, and I want to continue in another, in my case, fellowship program, because I'm very interested in fellowships. So I want a minimum of 20% of their students going into fellowships. Again, this is just a random number. You may want to do 80%, and you can, as you start looking at different programs, you can see the differences in the different programs and how many applicants do go on to fellowships and things like that. So I now have my list. I selected the East North Central region, and I am internal med. So this is what I have right here. You can select DO, but I like to keep all of them up because I like to see what percentage of all the different applicants are invited to interview at these different programs. So I'm just going to pick this first one. And you can see it has a direct link to the website. It gives you some ACGME information, their number, lots of different information. So you can see right here, they have a total of 18 residents. This is how many they've taken each year. Their continued accreditation. Right here, remember I talked about advanced programs. If they say prior GME required and it says yes, that is likely an advanced program. If you are looking for your sponsorship, you'll find that here. And then these are some of the items that I clicked that were important to me. And they talk here, they'll break up, these are my profile selections, and this is the program offerings, and if it matches my selections. You can also see the program's applicant trends. You can see how many applicants that they invited to interview. So you can kind of see what your chances are at this program. And also you can see hometown alignment. We talked about geographic information before. So we can see, amount of people, 24% had an alignment with geographic preferences, 5% did not, 4% had none. You can see hometown alignment in your application. You will indicate your hometown. You can see here that 42% identified as in-state, 11% out-of-state. So a lot of good information here to really look at. Here, USMLE Step 2, 19% never failed, but we do have a small percentage that did fail. So that tells you that they may be a little bit more accepting of taking someone with a failed board score. And then you can see what applicant types this particular program is getting. 40% of their applicants are USDOs, while 26% are USMDs, and then we have some USIMGs in there. And this is important, especially when you're deciding whether you should take the USMLE. It has both the USMLE requirements and the COMLEX requirements. You can tell when a program does not take COMLEX at all, everything will just be no on this side. But when you see yes on both, that means that they will take either USMLE or COMLEX. And you will see here a minimum score of 400 for level 2 and a minimum of 214 for your USMLE Step 2. This again is a breakdown of the demographics of the residents in all training years. So you can compare what this program is to the average ACGME internal med program. You can do it by gender, percentages of residents by medical school type. Like if you want to be with a lot of other DOs, this may be a program for you. And also it has a nice breakdown of where they take graduates, so like where they're commonly matched schools. So Lincoln Memorial University DeBusk is the top one, and then we kind of go on from here. So that could be, and that doesn't mean that if they don't have it, that you don't apply there. It could be a geographic region that's maybe not popular with some parts of the country, but something to keep in mind. And last but not least, this is where the fellowship comes in. So 100% of these internal med graduates go on to practice full-time. And you will see when you look at different internal med programs, you're going to see this varying a lot. You'll see like sometimes high 80s where you know a program really is preparing those applicants to go on to fellowship. So that's just something to keep in mind right here when looking for if your ultimate goal is to go into a fellowship. And then last but not least, once you have programs selected, you can start selecting them all, and then you can compare them side by side and looking at different preferences that you have for yourself. Thank you, and that's it for my section.
All right, so we'll go back to the PowerPoint slides. And our next section is going to be finding the right fit audition rotation. So one of the first questions that we often get for students when they're preparing for their 4th year is, what is the difference between an audition rotation and a sub-I or a sub-internship? And that is sometimes a school-specific designation, where an audition rotation is specifically a rotation at a hospital or a program at which you are intending to apply. And some schools have designated sub-internships that they either expect students to do or they mandate students to do, that are where they perform at the level of an intern, almost as if they were doing an audition rotation, but not necessarily applying to that program. So it's going to be dependent upon your school specific designation as to whether they require a sub-I or do not, and what are their expectations for you for your 4th year rotations. But when you are looking at programs that you want to apply to, you are primarily going to be looking specifically for audition rotations, unless that program itself requires you to do a sub-internship. How many auditions do I need? Now, this is a question that can be a huge variation depending on the student, depending on the specialty, depending on if they're applying to multiple specialties, or if they depending on how competitive they need to be. So it's always recommended that a student do at the very least one audition rotation to make sure that that specialty is a good fit for them. And a good kind of off the cuff number would possibly be 3 for somebody who's only applying to one specialty. I've seen students apply, do as many as 7 audition rotations, but that's obviously going to be a very unique situation, because usually you're also strained for time. You can only complete so many 2-week or 4-week audition rotations and meet all of your 4th year requirements, in addition to the fact that you're also going to be interviewing. So how do you choose your audition rotations? Now, one of the things that we have been talking about when we're looking at choosing the right fit program, choosing the right fit specialty, is making those lists in advance of when you start applying for auditions and when you start actually getting ready to submit your ARAS applications, and actually creating kind of like a working list of where you might want to apply for residency, and tailoring that down as you approach 4th year, so that you can really hone in on where are places that you want to get your foot in the door and make sure that you give a good impression so that you can be considered for applying for residency, and B, places that you might want to try out for yourself to see if it's a place that you could spend the next 3 to 5 or more years. And so those are going to be the biggest considerations in which programs you choose to audition at. When do you do your audition rotations? It's going to be slightly schedule dependent depending on your school's academic calendar. But generally it'll be as soon as you start 4th year rotations, all the way up through the end of the winter, kind of December area. It could be possible to do an audition rotation in January, but by that point, most interviews and ranking is winding down, so it's not going to be as impactful as an audition that you would have in the fall. So generally, fall of your 4th year is going to be the main part for your audition rotations. Next slide, please. When do you apply for audition rotations? So that's also a great question. When you're going to want to be submitting your applications around possibly the February, March of your 3rd year. Earlier, if your 4th year starts kind of early in the spring, you might have a little extra time if your 4th year starts kind of later in the summer. But if you could pull the next couple of bullet points ahead, Austin, that would be great. Excellent. So important things to keep in mind when you're applying for audition rotations is, like I mentioned, with that kind of working list of programs, you want to see about various aspects of how they go about having auditioners apply to them. Do they take applications only through VSLO, the Visiting Student Learning Opportunities Program? Do they employ something like Clinician Nexus? Do they have a specific application on their website? Does it have an application deadline, or does it have rolling application status? Even though I just said you're going to want to start applying for your audition rotations in February, March of your 3rd year, remember that is also around match season. So those programs may be exceptionally busy with managing the residency match and getting their incoming residents up to snuff. So it's going to be kind of a sort of a hazy time in terms of you can apply possibly as early as January of your 3rd year for an audition rotation, but it'll be kind of an ongoing rolling process as you build your schedule for 4th year, as you put together your different rotations. And your school may have specific requirements in terms of when they allow you to apply, when they allow you to start certifying or submitting the paperwork for your audition rotations, and when they're going to start approving audition rotations. So make sure that you stay on top of your school requirements and your school expectations as well. So VSLO, for example, is one very common way to obtain away or audition rotations, the visiting student learning opportunities. It's almost like a pre-ARAS version where you have access to a nationwide network of programs that offer away rotations and all kinds of specialties through there. And depending on where you want to go geographically or what programs you want to consider applying to, this may be the main way in which you get your audition rotations, or it may not be. Just as an example, I obtained most of my audition rotations during my 4th year by applying via the program websites or contacting their program coordinators. And I did get one rotation through VSLO, but that was after about 10 or 15 applications. So your mileage may vary, is just what I'm saying. You may not necessarily expect that all of your away rotations or audition rotations can come from one area or another. How many programs should you apply to? So this is going to be one of those scenarios where you really want to be targeted in the number that you apply to, because while you want to maximize your chances of getting audition rotations at locations that you are interested in, you don't want to burn any bridges by getting accepted to an audition rotation and having to cancel because maybe there was a program that you wanted to go to more that only offered you the same dates. So this is one of those scenarios in which you're going to want to kind of roll things out a little bit at a time, maybe apply in batches. We could go do an entire webinar, and we have done entire webinars on VSLO and audition rotations, but hopefully this gives you kind of a picture of what this looks like. So move on to the next slide, please.
Yeah, and I will start to wrap us up here. And hearing all these great things tonight, there's a lot to consider, but obviously we love these, practical steps of what do we do next? How do we move forward? And from a lot of what we were hearing today, we can start pulling together some data to find and identify those right fit specialties and programs. But I think a great first step is starting that program list. Kim brought one up earlier as an example. There's lots of different ways to approach this. But I think, these main things listed here, as you can see, are some of the key pieces you'd want: the actual programs, contact information for program directors, program coordinators. Of course, we talked about percentage of DOs that are accepted into a program as being incredibly important as a DO student. Applicant criteria that you can find that may be on sources like program websites or some of these other, locations that we were talking about briefly that you can search programs on. Along the way, you also want to be securing letters of rec. This is the time to be doing that if you're in clerkship rotations currently, and gearing up not just for later on down the line for residency applications, but maybe there's a letter of rec requirement for some audition elective applications coming up. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But of course, with that is identifying programs you want to audition at as well. I kind of think of that with my students as a precursor to this list that you're going to create and research much longer for when you go to apply for residency. Save this information, use this as a beginning to what your program list is, and get a good idea of what you're looking for. And then just our last slide, doing your homework. All of this is to make informed decisions. You're researching, you're collecting information to make informed decisions. You're not just diving right in without all, as many answers at least as you can find. These resources are out there for your help. Being realistic, understanding what you're competitive for, understanding what your limits are and what you can achieve, by the time that you go to apply, what you can get together. Networking along the way. Of course, we, can look at some of these numbers, research or service experiences or board exam scores, and all those things are going to certainly help in your application. But I've certainly seen where students may lack in some areas and make up for it 10 times fold with networking, putting themselves out there, attending conferences, talking and getting connected with alumni or, those outside of just our own network. And the list goes on. There's lots of opportunities to get to know programs, put yourself out there, and that's going to be incredibly helpful. This can start now and continue on into fourth year, certainly. But when in doubt, schedule time with your advisor. If that's a career or academic advisor at your institution, if that's student affairs, whoever is going to really, be helping you, make sure you take advantage of that resource as well.
All right, so we had a few questions that were submitted ahead of time that we can start to go through, and we can also field additional questions through the Q&A. So how do we know if which programs accept DOs? That was shown via the Residency Explorer. I don't know if there was any more detail that we want to provide here.
I have a lot of students that tend to ask me, what's the right percent? And honestly, there isn't and I know Kim had kind of touched on this, there's not a specific percent. Yes, the best resource is looking at Residency Explorer and looking at that specific program. You'll actually open up, like Kim showed you, that specific program. If you look at the data on the search engine page, that's what percent of DOs got an interview. But if you actually go to the resident section of the program, it'll tell you what percent of the residents are DOs. I tell my students, I really want to see you be applying to programs that have at least 15 to 20% DOs in them. Those are the programs that are much more likely to look at your application in the first place. So whether you be competitive or not, you need to make sure that they do take a decent number of DOs in their program. You can absolutely apply to programs that have less. Just note that the data is not as much in your favor that they're going to even open a DO applicant's application.
Thank you so much, Katie. So if a student is unable to rotate at a specific site or program, what are ways that they can really get a good assessment on whether the program's the right fit for them? Who would like to field that question?
That is something, when it comes to a specific program, you'll be able to do throughout your interview time with them. You'll get to learn a lot about that program. So yes, obviously doing an audition gives you a lot more insight, but when you get to interview with them, you'll get to learn quite a bit about that program. But you should also, during that interview experience, have an opportunity to meet with the residents and have some time with them to ask them some questions more about the program. The other thing to do, see if your school has alumni in that program. It's a great way to connect with alumni that are in the program to learn some of the ins and outs of the program. Alumni love to help take kind of care of their own and give some, honest feedback about a program, the good and the bad, off the record, of course. And so it's a great way to kind of get some inside knowledge about a program as well when you're not able to complete an audition.
And there are lots of other venues. Maybe you can go to one of the info sessions and really talk to the residents. If you happen to reach out to alumni who maybe you can get like a secondary degree connection to talk with. It's going to be difficult, but it is important when you're assessing those programs. So our next question is, how can data support the student dreams and maintain realism about competitiveness? This is definitely an age-old question for any residency advisor. So I'll open it to the floor for whoever would like to answer this one.
I'll take that one. I never want to tell someone you absolutely can't do anything, because we have seen some surprises, but I think being realistic, and if you are below competitiveness, perhaps have a parallel plan that you can exhaust all of your ranks, your top ranks in your primary or your preferred specialty, but have that backup parallel plan, and that you could rank after that. So you can give it your best shot. You can feel like you played this out, but and if it works out, great. But if it doesn't, you still have that parallel plan to fall back on, and you won't have to face SOAP in that particular situation.
add on to that, I think it also requires you to be intentional about where you do apply. So if you are not a highly competitive applicant for a specialty, like Kim said, most advisors aren't going to tell you can't, but we are going to tell you to do your homework and really research these programs and make sure that you are applying to the programs that are the best fit for you, that the data is more in your favor, that they're going to look at your application. One of the components in Residency Explorer shows you how many applicants that program had compared to what the national average is. If you're not a competitive applicant, you want that number to be a lot lower than the national average or at. But if it's above the national average, that's a highly sought after program when it's like double what the national average is. And so you can kind of use that data. And then there's another number in there on Residency Explorer on what % of their applicants get interviews. Again, and it shows the national comparative information. So you can see, how does this specific program compare to the national average? It helps you see how, how picky are they in their applicants and the % that actually get an interview. When you see the % get interviews be a lot higher than the national average, they're more holistic review. They tend to not be quite as much sticklers. They interview a lot more people. You have a greater shot of getting an interview. So use the data to just increase your odds of getting those interviews, because it's all showing you have a better shot. In addition to, like Kim said, having that parallel plan in place to increase those odds too.
All right, there's a question in the Q&A that I thought might be good to answer live. So if you have your rotation of the specialty that you're really interested in later in your third year, or in many situations for students, for example, who are interested in emergency medicine, not until their fourth year, but maybe you're not 100% sure that that's the specialty that you want to commit yourself to, how do you approach applying to audition rotations in that scenario? One suggestion I might give to a student would be to apply to one audition rotation for the beginning of their fourth year in that specialty. And if there were any other specialties that they were considering, set up their second audition in that other specialty. So if they were considering maybe emergency medicine and family medicine, do one of each for their first 2 fourth-year rotations. But I don't know if anyone else would have any other suggestions to add on to that.
Well, I might actually try to combine that with, there's a question, what are some tips on the best way to choose a specialty if you haven't had the rotation in that? And I think this kind of connects in the sense that, you definitely could, prefer to get that exposure while on the rotation to be best sure, or more exposure to be best sure, even if it's, one rotation you had and you're not sure yet. But I always push students to do as much research as you can in all different, aspects about the specialty. If that's the resource Careers in Medicine, having plenty of different opportunities there to learn about specialties, to understand how others decided on specialties. The specialty indecision scale you can do as an assessment to better understand what are my barriers and roadblocks to deciding. But then talking to, going back to networking, how learning how others decided on that specialty, on that path. Just learning more about programs themselves by reading and understanding what do they have to offer. So there's plenty out there to pull together. So it's the research of everything else you can do besides being in person. Maybe there's shadowing opportunities along the way that you can have. But going back to what Dr. Water said, I think that, you're kind of setting yourself up for maybe later on down the road, getting that additional exposure in fourth year, but doing all the research you can along the way.
Thank you so much. All right, so we're just about out of time. So thank you so much to all the panelists for their great advice, and to those who joined us. A recording of this webinar and will be posted on the AACOM and AOGME webinar series webpage within 7 days. And we'll also be sending the slides and that recording link to the registrants who came tonight. So please make sure to visit the webpage listed here for our upcoming webinars and to view recordings of previous webinars. If you have any further questions, you can always contact us at gme/initiatives@aacom.org. Thank you again for joining us, and have a wonderful evening.